This story comes from the 2010 Marvel Universe vs. the Punisher comic series. Please support the official release. The tale opens as we see Frank Castle's Punisher making his way through the ruins of New York City as he is being hunted by someone or something. As the man checked his surroundings, we finally see Frank's pursuer, and that would be this world's Deadpool, looking crazier than usual, where Frank remarks that this is the 33rd time that he had killed the mercenary. Hey man, those are rookie numbers. You gotta get those up. Luring his attacker into the open, we see things had played right into Castle's hands, as he fired behind him, striking Deadpool right in the head, instantly ending him. For now, Thinking back to all the creative ways he had already unalived the guy before, Castle thought that this time, maybe chopping the dude into bite-sized pieces just may do the trick. Frank then proceeded to Paul Allen Poor Wade, where he placed his bloodied remains into garbage bags, which he took for disposal. As he strategically buried Deadpool's desecrated parts into separate locations all across New York, we see that he was very much alone in a horrifying new world, one that was not always like this. In a flashback, we see that this world's journey to hell started with everyone's favorite wall crawler Spider-Man as he battled his longtime foe, the Rhino. In what seemed to be a standard everyday tussle in the streets between the pair, we see things begin to unravel, where Spider-Man got progressively more violent and brutal in his punches, which sent the villain hurtling through Madison Square Garden right in the middle of a nationally broadcasted hockey game. Thousands of fans would watch as Spidey would unmercifully beat the man down right in the center of the rink, where something unexpected would happen next. Once Rhino was a bloodied unconscious pulp, Peter would tear into the man's uniform and commence feeding on his flesh, screaming that this meat was all his. Seeing that the man was completely out of his mind, it took the might of the entire Fantastic Four just to take him down so they could get him into custody to see just what in the world was going on. Considering that the entire nation saw the wall crawler eat out a man's jugular on live TV, Reed Richards was publicly interviewed on their research into what could have caused such a drastic change in behavior. With the public initially believing Spider-Man to have turned into some type of zombie, we see that this was not quite the case, as Richards informed them that he was still very much alive. However, his biochemistry had been changed, altered to the point where his higher reasoning functions had been disabled. It was almost as if he had de-evolved into a primal, cannibalistic state, that of savage ancestors from thousands of years ago. All in all, he was simplified down to a literal, blood-hungry murderer. With the entire US reeling over this transformation of their favorite superhero, we would see things go from bad to worse, as more and more supers became infected with the likes of Blob, who one day just casually strolled into a Chinese restaurant and ate everyone in sight. Hey, talk about an all-you-can-eat meal, right guys? No? Sorry. As the most brilliant minds on Earth would give their insight to what they believed was happening, we would see the infection spread to normal humans as well, where we'd see a group of children go on a killing spree in a shopping mall, and even the cast of The View would randomly attack their audience members armed with knives. Even the likes of the God-fearing Daredevil would become infected, where he would go to his local church and fully consume the nuns, where he would craft a rosary out of their bloodied bones. That's honestly pretty metal. Would probably make for a sick Megadeth album cover. Society itself was unraveling, and just like Spider-Man, had went back to a more primal-like state, where even something as trivial as two local donut and coffee shops had banded into tribes and went to war with each other. While the surviving heroes initially tried to help save the infected, things spread so fast and the public got so violent, with even the likes of Captain America being forced to slaughter people in the city streets. The Punisher would recount that every day you'd have to make horrifying choices, as he was eventually forced to kill even Cap, and Sue Storm suffocated her own children. During this time, the former Fantastic Four member The Thing had also become infected, where he had killed countless heroes and declared himself a warlord in this new time, even crafting a throne for himself out of the bones of his victims. However, Punisher was able to take him down after nearly a year of fighting, after getting access to some high-level armor-piercing rounds. Hey, that sounds kind of far-fetched, but if anyone could kill the Thing, it's Frank, guys. He gets oh so creative and smart when it comes to, murder. With nearly everyone he knew being dead, this left Frank as one of the sole survivors of this horrifying new plague. As we come back to present day, we see Punisher burying the remains of Deadpool, where we discover that it had been 4 years since Patient Zero Spider-Man had started this decline of society. Frank was starting to lose hope that if no one came to save them by now, they never would. The next day, Castle would log into his war journal about what he'd been experiencing, even noting that he was living off nothing but protein bars and bottled water for survival. I mean, it's clearly working. You see how jacked this guy is? Vowing to track down and end the misery of each infected, Frank ventured out for this day's hunt in search of Spider-Man, the ever-elusive Patient Zero. Having evaded capture for years, Frank would see that Peter had grown over this time and was far smarter than his infected brethren, where he even came across a trap which contained a freshly slain victim on the ground and the Punisher's iconic skull logo painted on the wall. Investigating the victim's body, whom was webbed to the floor, Frank noticed that the body was still fresh and was not brutally killed like a standard infected. This was a clean knife wound, and even stranger, this victim was not infected. Puzzled by this mysterious offering sent by Spider-Man, Frank is taken to yet another flashback even further into the past, where we see just where this virus could have come from. Here we see a younger Castle who is investigating the Mafia and had been tipped off about a weapons dealing involving a project based out of the Middle East. Locating the warehouse where the deal was taking place, Frank saw the men handing off a suitcase which he initially believed to contain a portable nuke. Doing what Punisher does best, the man unloaded on the mob goons, purposefully avoiding the case to, prevent Fallout 5 from happening. However, we would see that this handoff was a fake-out, as the case itself was empty, and the Mafia was holding the true weapons in metal vials inside their jackets, which erupted when struck with Frank's armor-piercing rounds. Here we see gallons of a mysterious neon green-like liquid splash upon Castle and onto the warehouse floor. We discover that this liquid was a top-secret government serum created to aid the survivors of a nuclear attack. It would change their DNA to be suited to live and thrive in a contaminated environment. They'd be able to breathe polluted or irradiated air without harm, and could eat anything from rotted meat to cardboard for nutrition without worry of getting sick or poisoned. That is actually super helpful. Hey, Todd Howard, can we get this stuff in Fallout 5, speaking of that, please? Being hit with a full concentrated dose of the stuff, Frank recounts that he immediately puked all over the warehouse grounds and was sick for quite some time. But after these symptoms passed, he was never sick again, not even getting the common cold. During the later days of the infection, Hank McCoy from the X-Men would study Frank's biology and realize that it was likely due to this chemical exposure that likely prevented him from becoming infected with this virus. However, it was the actions of the Punisher that caused this pandemic. For on this very day, once the chemical had come into contact with a mafia member's blood, it then leaked into the nearby sewer system, which then led to the rivers, which created an entire domino effect of this compound, impacting the entire food chain. This exposure and its effect would go unnoticed for 7 whole months, giving the population ample time to unknowingly spread this disease all over the globe. It was after these 7 months that disturbingly violent crimes would stack up, which the media initially blamed on the economy and violent video games. I mean, hey, video games are always the answer for these things, right? Even coming across bodies half devoured, people were still in denial and blamed it on some kind of new serial killer. However, it was not until Spider-Man's public outburst that everyone started to realize what was going on, and it was all on a DNA level. They were all on a biological clock that was rapidly ticking towards doomsday. All thanks to Frank Castle, mind you. I mean, dude, you're awesome and all, but you know, if literally any other superhero came across this weapons deal, I don't think this would have happened the way it did. Honestly, I think even Deadpool would have been more careful. And that's really saying something. Finger pointing aside though, there was nothing that could be done now. The Punisher was the sole surviving hero of this global pandemic. Thinking back to the body from before, Frank knew that Peter left this for him intentionally. There were uninfected survivors out there, and whether this was a trap or not, Castle would find them and end Patient Zero once and for all. Loading up his weapons, the Punisher prepared for this mission as we look over countless heads all on pikes. Heads of the infected supers he had already slain. He knew that this was all his fault, and would now do everything in his power to save this fallen world.